So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along. Thanks very much for coming to this room to listen to the explorers who've come to share their experiences here. My name is Romain Troublé. Everything okay? Okay. Then we're off. I'm Romain Troublé. I run the Tara Oceans Foundation for about 20 years now with other founders. And we carry out scientific and teaching missions exploring the planet. We talk about our explorations. We talk about the history of exploration and one of the key challenges of this roundtable today. And it's going to be very spontaneous today, but very focused at the same time. I think that we we are we're not necessarily rational beings, and I think we are slightly animalistic and emotional, and perhaps what is lacking in all these meetings of the IPCC, and with each report, the predictions get worse, and I think the explorers, and particularly French explorers, are drivers, sharers emotion of lived experience of what it means to live in these slightly far-flung, isolated regions. Explorers are not alone to bear the full brunt of what is happening. If you're in the Pas-de-Calais, you had a meter of water in your kitchen. If you were elsewhere in France, there are other problems. So all having to do with these extremes and these occurrences of what is happening in the planet, given our addiction to fossil fuels. So I think we'll go around the table to get the speakers to introduce themselves. I'd like us really to have time for a question and answer session and perhaps have at least 20 minutes. So I could ask the explorers to be quite short in their presentations. We want to make this as interactive as possible. It's more fun than having PowerPoints throughout the whole morning. And I'd like each of you to relate to your own personal experience, be you a journalist or producer, explorer, a sportsman or sportswoman. It's important that you share your particular vision of what you experience when you're in high latitudes or in high latitudes or on the poles. So let's go around the table. I think what you all need to bear in mind is what is your key message? What's the salient message you wish to convey to heads of state, to politicians? We're trying to, as it were, to break out of. We want to generate something. We want a practical message. We want to move towards solutions, drive forward solutions for the future. Let's kick off with Stéphane Dugas. Stéphane, I know him quite well. We've met in Siberia in 2001, I beg your pardon, not 2021. So, and we spent 3 weeks together in Siberia, and in the far east of Siberia, and to accompany explorers. Stéphane, you're a writer, producer of documentaries, the Secretary General of French Explorers, the French Explorers Association. Since 2001, you've been doing reports and documentaries. You go off on boats. You do polar expeditions. And I'm going to hand over to you to talk to us a bit about your itinerary and why you're here this morning. Well, I just like to remind you, in Tonga in 2001, I was very poorly equipped. I was accompanying a French explorer. And it's a slightly sad but happy story because he returned alive. I was telling the woman, you got this famous Gore-Tex which protects you minus 40 degrees, and I had jeans and a wool jumper, and I've got some Swiss friends who ride with this when they go bicycling. But the cold so I had the cold in my flesh and in my heart, because following this trip I had the idea of going to walk in the steps of a famous French explorer in polar ice caps. Now, would you like the remote control of the slides? No, I'd like to speak enormously, but I like to talk. But you've got the beauty of Polish regions, but the Polish regions are shako when you're there. there's the greatest suffering, and then you come back to France. But when you get back to France, all you want to do is return to the polar ice caps. And I think there was sort of, I've just come from the mountain films in Grenoble, in the Pierre Mendès France Stadium, and the opportunity to talk about the polar ice caps and the myths and what was being done there. And I got almost booed, but with two questions. What purpose are explorers serve? What are they made of? Everything has been mapped out, and the summit. Now the observations. We know the summit, the polar ice caps. You're never going to find the right solutions, but on high politics, things are a bit slower. Whereas Instagram, you have instant answers and instant knowledge. You click on something, you have an automatic response or answer. But you learn about the best and the worst on social media. But utopia is not yet unattainable. It's just not yet attained. And I think that in polar regions, well, we're not going to lie to each other just to enjoy it for the sake of lying. But when you're faced with the beauty and the savageness of raw nature, well, it's remarkable. And we're environmentalists. We as documentarists or journalists to provide a testimony, and we've seen that there's been several meters of glacier retreat. We saw the photos. Now, these glaciers covered the Greenland, and what we were able to see, we came back to France. We said, hang on a second, we've seen some things which are a bit strange happening. And 17 years ago, we, far from thinking, I remember that the professionals, environmental professionals, there were people who backed Claude Leg and those against him, but we now know what needs to be done. The solutions are already out there, and we've got explorers around the table who are there to confront the world as it is, but they are shadow zones, if you like, or zones in the shadow. And we need to work with scientists, but the solutions are out there. They're within our grasp. But I'd like to say yesterday some very strong reactions against what I was saying, but I hope the atmosphere will be more pleasant today. Thank you very much, Stéphane. So we'll stick with the polar summits before moving off to glaciers. Alban Michin, you work in the polar regions with you're a diver, deep sea diver. You've been exploring, I think, in around 2010, I believe, in the kayaks around Greenland. You spent time near Canada as well, northern Canada. You do quite a lot of things alone, I think, you explore trips. Well, as opposed to myself, when I go exploring, I got a team with me. But there's a different style of approach, I think. Solitary exploration. It's really quite interesting. Good. Yeah, well, thank you very much for this kind introduction. I'm very moved to be here today. I'm delighted to be with you to talk about the North and South Poles and glaciers. I'm called Albin Michon. My career began in Upper Savoy in Teen. Two things that struck me. First of all, I fell in love with ice due to diving in a frozen lake. Diving into the frozen lake, I find it was so beautiful, so magnificent, so impressive. The way the light played across the surfaces, and what made me want to discover the world of ice and glaciers. It was a sort of visual beauty that I discovered. At that time, about 20 or so years ago, we had temperatures which were going down to minus 25. But today, what we've noted, it's difficult to get down to even minus 18 in the middle of winter. And so what I've noticed, like many people here, the glaciers and the ice in Teen is increasingly in retreat. And what we noticed in 2019, that there's a bit of water under the glacier, and it expanded. It has created a pro-glacial leak, which is about 200 meters deep, and I beg it's 200 meters wide and 18 meters deep. It has moved very quickly, and this made me want to explore the world of ice and glaciers. So I wanted to discover the entire Antarctic and elsewhere. And indeed, in 2010, an expedition to the North Pole, which I took part, and I got a slap in the face. I saw this as a magnificent area, extreme, savage, but very fragile. A small anecdote here. On the 26th of March, we landed. A few days later, we dived under minus 17 degrees. And but we can, when we try to punch through the ice, we can get a month later, it was minus 1.4. The glass, the ice was a bit rounder. You could punch through the ice much more easily. A month before, we couldn't. But with 0.5 degrees difference, changed everything. Well, I thought in teen it would be minus 25, but it's down to 18. So the change is afoot, and it's happening extremely quickly, DT. And the Antarctic and the North Pole are changing 3 or 4 more times more rapidly than the rest of the world. Now, the question is, what purpose do explorers serve? What are they made of? Well, we're manual workers. We're also guinea pigs. We reveal things to people. We inspire the public, and people say, what did you do last week? I found what you do incredible. We've got photos which prompt people to act. We talk about flora, fauna, we make films, we write books, and we meet the people who live with the polar world. Now, my last expedition was in the northwest, where I went for 62 days, and trying to grasp what the importance of ice was and the way it was changing. And my last expedition will serve the broader community. Now I've grasped the significance of ice. The idea is to create an underwater research station which will enable the scientific community to live with at the heart of the ice community under the water, it will be a research center, modular or transportable, which will be accessible to all scientists to furnish information. You shouldn't forget what Stefan said. The world is changing, and what happened 20 years ago, what we saw 20 years ago, will no longer be true in 20 years' time. So researchers and scientists need to document all the changes afoot, and particularly in the 2 polar regions. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much, Alban. Thank you for this fine testimony. We're with you, both above and under the water, above and under the ice. Now we're going to move to Europe Aragonese. So you're a filmmaker. You've been in Le Mans. You graduated from the Gobelin School in 2004, and then later on from the National School of Photography. And you've provided a personal interpretation of ice and glacial landscape, and you can you convey both the fragility and the monumental nature of glaciers and ice. And over to you, dear colleague. Well, thank you very much, and good morning, and thank you very much to you as well. Yes, well, I beg your pardon. I'm slightly tongue-tied. I'm an artist. I'm a photographer. And in my artistic work, I take a keen interest on the imprints of water upon the landscape, the relationship between rocks and water, and on aquatic trends and the way they interact with the landscape. And within the framework of this research, I began in 2012 to do an inventory of the different glaciers which go to make up the Mont Blanc mountain range in France, Switzerland, and Italy. You've almost around 80 glaciers in this particular mountain range, the Mont Blanc range. My idea was to make an inventory of them. I've been doing this for the last 5 years, and it's work that I've done in a photographic chamber, because my idea was to recreate what had been done by initial pioneers who left, who went with illustrators and photographers to accompany to document these areas which were unknown at the time and remained to be discovered. But it was not really an exploration process. It was a re-exploration process to look closely once again at these forms of landscape which have already been documented, but which talk to us, conveying other messages today, saying different things today. Now, this is the photo camera. It's a large camera system which creates negatives, which 10 by 12 centimeters. What's interesting about this form of camera and enables you to have a great deal of visibility, particularly in terms of detail, because it was quite trying for me, I think, I'm not really a sporty kind of person or a natural sportswoman. Well, a little bit, I think, to do an expedition, something like that. Well, I think even in going into the mountains, I needed to have a special camera which make it possible to, which will create a lot of detail, which create a sort of gentle vision of things, sort of terms, and which photos that were easy on the eye, because mainly with these kind of photographs, rocks are very dark, ice is white. She's got a very stark contrast between the two. So I wanted to strike the right balance. But I was also inspired by a photographer called Aimé Sivian, who is a graduate of one of France's elite universities, the Polytechnique, and a geologist. And she was working with photography during her expedition. So there's a really close correlation, or as a link, if you like, between conquering the Alps and photography and the way it developed. Now, today, our perspective has shifted. Rather than it being an area region to conquer or to dominate, or an area for sports and recreation, the things have shifted. Mountains have become a symbol, an icon of climate change. It's no longer a region to conquer, but more one to protect. So our perspective, our outlook has changed. I like to show some water paintings of Paul Heilbronner, who's also a scientist. He's done an inventory of various mountain summits in the French Alps. He's tried to do a mapping, a sort of a watercolor-based mapping of the Alps summits. And therefore, despite all these people being scientists, images and photos play a pivotal role. And why images and photos are important for scientists, and why can the intuitive approach of photographers and artists contribute to this debate? So it's work which involves creating inventory, doing a stock take, if you like, and we try to combine the two things, as it were, the artistic and the scientific, to create something which is new. And that's what I like in this inventory process. We're juxtaposing photos, we're going combining them, comparing them, and try and create something out of them, and give free rein to our own imagination. So that's why I enjoy this work so much. And what else can I usefully say at this stage? You work a great deal in the European Alps, yes. Well, yes, mainly on the Mont Blanc area, on the northern slope, the Italian slope. And this is the slope in Italy, which is a glacier. It's described as being dead. It's been covered in stone. And in fact, you can walk upon it. It's like walking on it's sort of slightly unusual. You've got these streaks of ice, and when you're walking in the mountain, the glaciers, we call them giants, normally speaking, but there is something almost, it's almost like a foreign creature or an animal undergoing to change. With global warming, it gives you the impression that you're coming across wounded animals. You've got wounded animals strewn across your path, as it were. So in order to do this work, I'm not, as I said, I'm not a particularly sporty person, so it was physically quite taxing experience. But I set myself a check taking one photo per glacier, and the photo show says you can't take many, so I had to spend a lot of time trying to locate the ideal locations and times for taking photos, because the photos can only be a limited number, but I only had very few images. So one glacier, one photo. I worked with Stephen Shaw, who was a documentarist photographer. We worked in close cooperation, and enabled the people to. So here again, this is the Italian size. I beg your pardon. No, this is Switzerland here. No, you've got various viewpoints, various vantage points. I did some life scale shots and then some more distant shots. This is a accumulation slope. This is the Aiguille de Trillon in Switzerland. The Plateau of Trillon is a form of basin where the snow will fall, and via an effect of compression, it becomes ice, and it will move down slowly into the valley. You've got the Trillon Glacial, which flows from this accumulation basin. And I also work with the glaciologist Moreau, and I met as a residence. There was an artist residence in the Saint-Gervais area in the Upper Savoy region, and there was some glaciology experts there, and one of the colleagues introduced me. This is the beginning of a major form of cooperation, exchange of files and photos. I found this what I found extremely interesting was to combine or reconcile the formalistic or the intuitive and artistic work with a more scientific, empirical approach. And the way Moreau, there was something very poetical in the cooperation to try and to increase the awareness, heighten the awareness of people, and there was a great useful metaphors. It's a very fine form of cooperation. So we can see explorers are not just high-level sportsmen who go out into the cold and the unknown to take on the elements, but they're also quite sensitive people as well, sensitive, artistic, and they're people who go into the nature and who talk about their emotions as well. We can see that from the photos. We're going to leave that particular avenue of approach, and we're going to move over to Thierry Souzan. You're a journalist, a photographer, a writer. Jamal, I beg your Jamal. Jamal Dai, I do beg your pardon. You're a producer of documentaries. You've dated 2 documentaries to the Antarctic. You know Claude Homineus, who was immensely fortunate to meet and with whom I was able to exchange, a remarkable man who unfortunately died at the beginning of the year. But I'll let you talk about him, dear colleague. So, contrary to my 2 colleagues, I'm an explorer of the polar region and in polar regions. And Claude Aurelius, thanks to Lord Colliers, who left us in March, unfortunately, in 2021, as the most eminent glacier specialist in the world. And if we had to, he is one of the original who made it possible to understand there was an effect. There was effect on glaciers due to industrial human activity. He grasped it 20 years ago. Well, that's when we met. And as a documentary maker, I was particularly interested in his personality. But I was interested in history, particularly the key personalities. And he was really quite a remarkable, extraordinary man. He was able to discover the polar universe. Even I've met Paul and Victor 2 times before. And Nicolas Hulot was very much linked up this man. So I've met Nicolas twice, but it's via Claude Lois I discovered the polar regions and polar research, and particularly in the Antarctic. It's thanks to Antarctic ice that there is global warming due to the greenhouse gas effect generated by industry. And I grasped to what extent that research was very particularly interesting. Now, what was remarkable during these years, I was in touch with Claude. I took part, I attended conferences, and I constantly saw this mention. The people who were sounding the warm band, Claude Lers and others, indeed, it was 20 years ago. Things really haven't shifted. And now, why we're here today for the very same reason, because we become aware there's a degree of inertia. But even 20 years ago, even 30 years ago, they were sounding the warm band. Hang on a minute. Wake up, everyone. We are sleepwalking into disaster. And so we need to move forward. What are the governments that we have? We need some political decisions, and that's why it's important to come to this meeting today. So with Claude, we're talking about this for after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. We say, this time things are going to change. This time is going to happen. In fact, it never changes. It never moves. So the key, Celia mentioned, for young people, the scientific careers are remarkable careers. and we've got societal opportunities like this. You've got to trust scientists, whoever they might be. Science is what enables us to really grasp that climate change is taking place. There are upheavals taking place. It's not sufficient to observe, to go on the spot and see the glaciers in retreat, or the melting is taking place. You have to see this over a very long period of time scientifically. It's what Claude taught me. When you've grasped this, you ask yourself the question, why? And because there are many reasons which might explain this major upheaval. People use the saying it's greenhouse gas emission, which trigger global warming. The greenhouse gas, it's a natural effect of the planet. What is the problem? It's the excess that we brought to this. And scientists say, sometimes they correct me, the greenhouse gas is never is natural. We need that for vegetation life. And that's what glaciers and interglaciers. What is a problem is this excess, this extremely, this change which is exponential and very rapid. So this is what scientists have been saying for decades. And we've got to move forward. This is what's said by colleagues. Explorers are, well, first of all, in polar regions and in the deserts were there as well, because they're curious, because they want to have adventures, but they're witnesses. They tell people what's happening. They share information. Information, emotion are remarkable stories with us. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Jamil. All right, so we finish with our last speaker, explorer, Thierry Suzan. You are a journalist, a photographer, a writer. You are a member of the Society of Explorers, and of course, you've been writing lots and lots of articles about the poles. Yes, indeed. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here because we talk about explorations, travels, global warming, etc. And this is the outcome of some findings. And well, I will tell you about my own experience. I'm glad to be here, especially because I would like to convey another type of message regarding the poles. I am the representative of the of people at large, and people, for example, are not fully aware of what's happening today. And I can see that lots and lots of young people, for example, they do not have a good understanding of those issues, for example, regarding the poles. Well, let me tell you about my own experience. For example, I am a journalist, as I said. I've been working with other journalists. I am a traveler, an explorer. I am, of course, amazed by the beauty of the landscapes. And regarding my experience, of course, I have a strong character because I try, of course, to think about what I can see in the world, for example, regarding the planet, the Earth, the poles, etc. But I think that I need to be consistent about what I believe and what I write down. And I think that this is so much important. It's the reason why I decided to work on my own, to be more consistent with what I believe about what I've seen, for example, and especially about people that I've met. And then at the same time, I realized that some of my friends maybe they were a bit depressed, a bit disappointed, I would say. They were a bit disappointed, a bit depressed. Why? Because the world was considered to be something very bad or whatever. So I would like to say, and this is the reason why I've tried to be more optimistic. We need to be optimistic. I mean, this is, of course, my point of view, but this is what I would like to tell you, the message I would like to convey, because as I can see, I've been able to give lectures in various schools in Belgium, for example. I met with lots of students, and young students don't feel so involved. And I said, why? Why? Because what we say, we explorers and researchers and politicians, is no more understood by those students. They don't have a good understanding of that. And for example, I'm in charge, I am in relation with the French education system, and they realize that the ecological transition, etc., is not well perceived by young people. They believe this is something very bad, doomed to fail, etc. And of course, we try to find out optimistic solutions. This is where we stand today, I would say. So I think that, well, of course, we are talking about the impact of the climate change. I would like also to talk about the psychological impact, for example, regarding this issue, because I believe because of our interests, the challenges regarding explorers, scientists, and politicians, etc. For example, because of course these are considered as adventures, etc. But do you think that it still makes sense? Of course, these explorers would, of course, do a lot in the past. But I think that today we have to reconsider this, to revisit this concept, for example, because, as I said, today people are so much scared about the situation of the Earth, for example. And today I'm no more considered as a journalist, I would say. I will try to act as an artist, even though this is about beauty, etc. I don't want to be naive, of course, about that. But I believe that today, art will make it possible for all of us to pave the era for new possibilities, because I think that we need to make it possible for all people to agree upon this concept. This is what people expect from us, for example, from us as journalists or explorers, etc. This is what they expect. And I think that we need to foster upon these concepts for all the people, be more open-minded in this respect. And I believe that art, beauty, wonder will represent the driving force for these people who will at least accept this concept. And this is my position. It is the reason why I will be glad today to answer your questions about this aspect. I think that metaphysics becomes more and more important. Okay, at the end of the day, as Pascal Lamy said before, okay, explorers are people who have a good understanding of the situation. And of course, and nowadays, people all over the world are fully aware of the situation. And this is so much important. And of course, now we need to be more pragmatic, as I would say. And very often people might say, well, you are a bit naive, etc. What is the use of it? I think that even President Macron has said that regarding the book that I wrote some time ago about this wonder and beauty. And this is what President Macron said whenever he gave an address in Abu Dhabi for the Louvre exhibition. I believe that people have to be aware of that. The language of beauty should be universal today, thanks to emotion, etc. And this is something that we have to consider for the future. Thank you for your attention.
Pour ton message et pour ce témoignage. Je vais vous...
Thank you. Now, regarding young people, regarding what Thierry said, we will have, of course, a Q&A session about young people and what the president intended to say on Friday, sorry. I'm glad because I went to Antarctica twice, 15 years ago and last year on board the Tara ship. Last year we went over there and we crossed the seas regarding the Cape Horn, etc., with the mountains of water, etc., with worlds of water, etc. It was fascinating, fascinating. And we are nothing. We feel that we are nothing in nature. And of course, what about our individual impact upon nature? And that was amazing, because I remember I was on the deck of the Tara ship for hours and hours, and I tried to understand the power of our planet. And then after 15 years, you can't see the difference regarding the glaciers, regarding biodiversity, biomass, etc. in the Antarctica. You can't see the difference. Regarding the figures given by the IPCC, I would say that our society has to adapt itself to these conditions. But regarding mankind, which is so tiny, which represents nothing, anyway, we have a big impact upon the climate change. So that's the big difference. And my feeling is that we need, of course, to be able to act all together, all together. This is what we need to do. This is the reason why this summit today, well, of course, might be a political summit. It's possible, but 2 years ago at the One Ocean Summit, I attended that summit 2 years ago with the ambassador, and we were able to build up some coalitions, for example. That is so much important in favor of the planet, in favor of the ocean. And after 2 years, we have a good follow-up of that experience with 50 countries at the United Nations that are able to advocate for this type of issue. And this is so much good, because that leads to new treaties, conventions, etc. Okay? But this is what we have to do if we want to work on a joint basis at the United Nations. And this is so much important for the peace purposes. And then, well, we're going to get some questions anyway, questions for the explorers. And this summit is so much important. The ocean seems so far away. There are 10 million sailors on the seas, maybe 10,000 scientists on the seas at the present time. This is nothing compared to 8 billion people. Regarding North Pole and South Pole, this is so much far away. The North Pole is much further than New York City. But I imagine 6 million people locals are living over there. Maybe there are 10,000 researchers regarding the Antarctic. This is, let's say, people are not fully interested. They are not interested in this subject. Okay, we go there as explorers to the North Pole, to the South Pole, etc. We show pictures, etc. We communicate, and there, for example, 15 years ago, we would have one passenger ship. Today, there are 2 passenger ships every day, full of 200, 300 passengers. This is what we have to tell people. This is what we have to communicate. And people shouldn't go there, but they don't care, because they are interested in sightseeing and they have the money for that. And I think that this is something that people should be aware of. Okay? As explorers, I believe that this is the message we have to convey. Please don't go to the North Pole, etc., because of pollution, right? So maybe someone, Alban, would like to react or to say something about that. What do you think of that? And then we will also talk about the message conveyed to the young people. Young people are scared. Don't be scary. And of course, it's understandable. It's understandable. As students, for example, of course, you're not proactive. And as students, and of course, this is complicated for them. But then, if you are more optimistic, you won't be scared again. And this is the message we have to convey to young people. Alban, you wanted to say something. Oh, Stéphane wanted to say something. Yes, indeed. Regarding the beauty of the world, as Thierry said, the beauty of the glaciers, of glacier, etc., is so much important. But at the same time, that puts an emphasis upon the fragility. And whenever I give lectures, for example, and especially regarding Paul-Émile Victor, for those who have known him, those who are more than 60 years of age, they know him, they know what he did. And whenever you talk about the explorer, Paul-Émile Victor, of course, this is a go-between between the past, the present time, and the future. And this is so much important. You know, you have to know where the future is. And regarding beauty, we as explorers, for example, explorers or sporty explorers, etc., emotions are so much important. You need to feel emotional. A year ago, I was in front of two young people, young students, and who were unhappy, and I was supposed to talk about explorations. And tomorrow I will give a lecture in a jail, for example, in Nantes, about the polar explorations. You know, these people, for example, I don't know. Of course, I have to communicate with these people, but I try, of course, to think out of the box with these people. The polar regions are so much important because regarding explorers, we go through ups and downs, I would say. Sometimes you feel cold, you feel hungry, etc. You feel fall in the water, etc. You may have some technical problems or whatever. And of course, this is important to know. And of course, we have to communicate upon this emotional aspect. As I said yesterday in Grenoble, this is part of our ethics. This is a mindset, if you will, because of the world in which we live, for example, with the media hype, etc. So this is the type of discussion we had yesterday, regardless of TikTok, these awful media. And Romain, I agree with you because I understand what is done regarding the Tara experience, what about education, etc. And our daughters are of the same age. And as Romain said, we are here today in order to work on a joint basis. And this is important for the future, 190 years ago in the future ahead. And okay, so I believe that scientists have the best solutions to provide. And like you, Romain, I'm so happy, for example, and I expect that our children will, of course, have a better future again, versus the Titanic wreck in 1912. Alban, what about you? I believe in science, of course. Science is so much important. Technology is so much important, of course, because we have the possibility to understand the development of the world, but we need to invest in this respect. Of course, this is so much important. And on top of that, education is so much important as well. We need, of course, to be able to elaborate on that. Otherwise, people will not understand the use of it. Now, education is so much important, especially for filmmakers, etc. This is art, of course. And sorry to tell you that, but the world is still beautiful, and we have to keep it as it is. Now, regarding anxiety, I don't like this word. Why? Because I would say that sometimes you have to be aware of what of the setting. You can't tell your children, "Oh, I'm so sorry, everything is we can't do anything for that," etc. So of course we need to be proactive. We have had an example. In the 80s, scientists realized that there was a big hole in the ozone layer, right? And of course, we had the Montreal Protocol, if you remember, that was signed by 25 countries. And they said, okay, we're going to agree upon that. That was in 1985, okay? And then we have to do something, okay? And then the CFC gases were replaced. Of course, it takes time, I understand. But that hole was reduced. This is the message I would like to convey. So please be proactive. Keep your chin up, of course, if you want to do something. We have, of course, to invest. This is so much important.
Terry, would you like to react? So do think about the questions that you want to ask in the room, because we will leave time for questions and answers. So I just wanted to go back and talk about what you said about polar tourism or Arctic tourism. So as explorer, we often think that we see things, we notice things, we live things. But what you said earlier is true. We don't want you to go out and wreck everything that we find this beautiful. But I think the issue is with polar tourism. Thankfully, it's not mass tourism, especially when it comes to Antarctica. But we're slowly moving in that direction towards more and more tourism in the poles. And tourism as is not an issue. What is an issue is the tourist itself and the way the tourist looks at things. So I went to Antarctica quite a couple of times, and we would travel to Antarctica and observe. We would land on beaches, take pictures, breathe in the good air. We would avoid and make sure that we're not leaving trash behind, and then we would get back on the boat. So it was a really, it was a trip to observe. But nowadays tourists want to do different things. They want to kayak, they want to do extreme sports. Airbnb has a formula for tourism in Antarctica right now, and so this is this behavior that is the issue. And I'm often talking about the psychological aspect of things, but the issue is that this continent is becoming more and more approachable. And we do not touch Antarctica right now simply because the entire world would be against exploration in Antarctica. But we're slowly moving towards a world in which people don't care, and soon enough there will be young teenagers getting married in Antarctica, for all you know. And so you have to educate tourists. I don't have anything against people traveling to these places, and I wish that everyone could see what I've been able to observe as well. But your state of mind has to be the right one. We have to educate people and change their behavior and state of mind. And I think we have to educate the youth and educate the younger people amongst us, because they will be the players of tomorrow, and they will be the ones who will change the world. And so this is why I'm talking to them first and foremost. Are there questions in the room? We only have 10 minutes, I'm sorry. So question in the room, sir. We will hand out microphones in the room. Are there people following us online? This is a live event, and we are online as well. Thank you. So question in the room. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all of this information with us. It's essential that you share it with the youth and the next generation of explorers. And I had a question about education and the link between education and exploration. So I'm the president of a very small association in Toulouse, which I created after having read the biography of Paul-Émile Victor. I was simply amazed, and I have less than 60, so I did know about him, but we wanted to build a partnership with a school. So it was a little program for explorers. So we started with one school in Toulon, and nowadays we have more than 10,000 students that take part in our programs, and our program had such a huge impact, and I was simply amazed by what we were able to achieve, and what we were able to teach the children and what they understood. And so we really wanted to focus on this approach, and to fight as well against a student wanting to leave school or a student failing at school, by really building partnerships that and building a program that could then be applied at a larger scale, to really spark the interest and spark the curiosity of young people. You have much more experience than me, and what is your take on this when it comes to including education in expeditions and in exploration? What are the needs of tomorrow that you see and can highlight? What are the needs for the new organizations that will be created? Does anybody want to answer? Yes. So absolutely, it's essential. My parents are teachers, and so I believe in education. and I have been talking with a teacher in the 20th arrondissement in Paris that works in a school in a priority zone in France. So it is schools in more difficult areas of the country in France. And so I asked a school of 10th grader or 6th graders rather if they knew about explorers, and what they told me was that they knew Dora the Explorer. So this is a little joke, but this teacher who I was mentioning in the 20th arrondissement had an idea, which was to invite explorers in her classroom so that they would be able to tell stories to the children. And so she articulated her entire program for the entire around exploration and explorers. And Tara, 20 years ago, started with an educational program as well. And 20 years ago, people thought it was quite odd to include explorers in education. But yes, it was in 2006, and I with another explorer has been working in Antarctica for 35-40 years. And so we went to a Pierre and Marie Curie in a classroom. It was a university. And we met with the Gérard Bonneau, who looked at us in a slightly odd way. We're dudes with a boat that was privately financed that would carry out research in the North Pole. So he looked at us a bit oddly, and so he had lots of questions. But we stuck it out. If you want to have an impact on education, you have to really enter the world of education. You have to meet with specialists. It took us a long while. It took us a very long time to be able to reach the whole of the French Education Academy. But I think, I believe that today we are present and we intervene in lots of different schools around France, and we tell stories to more than 150,000 kids per year. And there's also other programs that involve students, and the practical workshops, so that children get involved. They have to create, for example, in some of these programs, they have to create a news video, and so, but these are different programs. These are innovative programs, and they're all interesting. Very short questions now and very short answers. In the middle, you have the mic. Could you please raise your hand so that we can hand you out the mic. Yes, hello. I am a researcher at the CNRS. I work in the Arctic and on the polar systems, and I had a question for you. Is your role as explorer not to teach the kids about sobriety, the sobriety of exploration, so do it at a more local level, on a local scale? Teach these children to be amazed and find amazement in the local and what's around them, and not in what's far away, not in the Arctic. We don't talk a lot about sobriety, but it's the only solution that we have to slow down this environmental crisis and climate crisis. The climate crisis is hitting us all everywhere around the globe. And so this is what my question was. What is your view on positive sobriety? It can be very positive and lead to less anguish, what we call environmental anguish. Does anybody want to answer? Of course, it's a key challenge. So on Tar, we're on sailboats, and so we try to use the sails as much as possible. But there are scientists that travel around on planes and take the plane every day, and really, you have to take the time to observe. So we can also talk about, think about the fact that it's far away. You're attracted to what is further away from you. But maybe we should re-explore what's around us. And we don't have to go very far away. And children can go out on walks, can observe around them, explore rocks, and do local geology. And so this is a way that you can open up this window and teach them about the world. we don't necessarily have to travel far away to be amazed. So I'm almost 50 now, and so we used to do this when I was in middle school. I would go to the park nearby, and we would do geology workshops. And yes, we continue to do so. And you're completely right. We have to continue to do it as well. And my colleague talked about the fact that we're attracted to what's far away, what's further away. And we're no longer explored to conquer lands or to spread religious beliefs. No, we're exploring mostly for science itself. But of course, you're right. On a personal level, there are many explorers that have carried out the best expeditions near their homes. I crossed France on my bike. I took a bike trip, and it was one of my best expeditions. Yes, so about sobriety, this question is very interesting because it leads us to another question, which is, what is the purpose of exploration and expeditions? What is the purpose of an explorer? Are we still useful? Sharing our stories, what does that mean? Nowadays, there's many people who are on boats. They're currently sharing stories and observing what we see year-round. And so it's interesting. It's also extremely complicated, even within the framework of the French Explorers Association. It's very difficult to ask this question, and we have a very difficult time debating around the issue of exploration, of sobriety, of local exploration. Is it useful? Is it not useful? But they are real and concrete questions that we have to bring to the table. We will need to organize a debate to build the world of tomorrow and work with the children. They're very essential questions. Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else want to take the floor? And there's a question in the back. Anne, Brigitte. Thank you. Thank you very much for this information and your stories. We see that there's scientists on tourism trips nowadays, but there's big debates currently going on within the scientific community, and that debate is whether or not we accept to go on passenger boats, so tourism trips. Do we accept to board big ships, big tourism ships, and to go explore that way? Have you thought about potentially having a type of certification, a type of certificate to really label yourself as sustainable explorers, or maybe a scientific committee that would gather you all? Maybe we should put this on the agenda for the next meeting of the French Explorers Society. And within the French Explorers Society, ever since 1937, there's only 3 men and women. And so once you have rules, it all goes wrong. Explorers have very big egos, and so it's sometimes difficult to find common ground, but usually there are people that are quite structured, they're organized, and so you are right. Yes, when it comes to these tourism ships that you were talking about, I took part in a research project on the Commandant Charcot with Le Figaro, and so a question was asked about these type of ships and are they really useful to science, and we wanted to answer that question. And then there was an oceanographic campaign on in a boat, and scientists just like yourself said otherwise. But it's very difficult to find a common ground between scientists, explorers, and all the different players. But with dialogue, we usually achieve that. But this is a question that's tied to the ethics of exploring. So when it comes to the question that was asked by Anne, it's an essential question. But explorers and journalists or movie producers, when they leave to go to these regions, usually they go with a scientific team, and then there's explorers that do solo trips that are with a smaller team. So the impact is not as big. But the tourism industry in these regions or in other regions, whether it's Venice or others, causes an issue, causes pollution, and this is an issue that puts at risk all these different regions and puts at risk these natural treasures. But the issue here is the tourism industry, because it has grasped people's amazement for these polar regions, and so now they take millions and or rather thousands of tourists to these regions because scientists have spoken about them, explorers have spoken about them, there have been movies made about these regions. So, and I think the tourism industry is what's is the issue here, because when there's teams that are accompanying scientists on a research mission, then the impact on the environment is insignificant. So maybe we should follow the rules that we used to follow a century back. We don't necessarily need to travel to the other side of the world to be amazed. As Stéphane was saying earlier, he crossed France on his bicycle, and he observed and explored that way. And nowadays, people write books about so many different topics, all of the topics under the sun, but we have to ask ourselves one question: what is worth it? What is useful? Last question now in the room. We only have 3 minutes left, Brigitte. So I just wanted to react to the different to what the different speakers have said. Sobriety is essential. It's very important. The French National Education has created certificates or certification, as we could call them. And so they're very interested in working at a local scale. And at Tara, we're also focusing on this and focusing on sobriety. And then somebody else was talking about the impact for children. At Tara, we use a lot of remote and online work. We don't... when we work with children, we can't invite them all to board the Tara ship, and so we share what's going on the Tara ship through online tools, and it's very engaging, and children really react well to it, and they react well even to these remote conferences and remote lectures, so. They are ways, and there are little knickknacks that you can and systems that you can put in place to engage with children in different ways. One last question in the room. We also have children in the room because it's Wednesday and children aren't in school. But thank you for being here. So I had a question about you. What made you want to become explorers? You were talking about explaining your travels to younger people. Have you seen a difference between young people back in the day, and young people now? Have you noticed? Yes. There's a massive difference. When we're in a classroom, when we're in middle schools that are in challenging zones, and well, it's hard to talk about explorations, but you have to find something that unites us all. For example, for me, what sparked my interest in exploration was Indiana Jones. And at the end of a lecture, when you see, when you have a child come up to you and say, "I want to take part in your next exploration," then you know you've won in some way. We no longer explore to conquer lands, to take away, to build mines, to take away the treasures of certain local populations. What we explore now to better preserve and better protect environments. And so, to become an explorer, there's no single path that you can take, but it's a wonderful job. You have to interact with youth. You have to. You can no longer only tell them about what you see. I'm a journalist, I'm an explorer, I'm a photographer, I'm this and that, and I have different hats. But what you have to do nowadays is really engage with the children. And my last experience happened in a high school in Strasbourg. So in the southern islands in Polynesia, I was on a boat. And so the theme, or the topic, was information, journalism, and exploration. And instead of having them follow me as an explorer, follow the big explorer, we decided to change the roles. I told these kids, you will now be the main player. You will tell me how I gather information, how I diffuse information, how I and so I really engaged with the children and interacted. And so they asked me for documentaries. They asked me to do certain things, to carry out different tasks. And so there was a real exchange between the kids and I, and it sparked their curiosity and interest. And so we all have to get involved in these types of projects, whether it be in a partnership with a school, as I did. We have to go beyond just sharing our stories. Thank you very much. We unfortunately have to conclude now. The police is telling me that I have to stop this conference. One last question in the room, and it's a question in English.
So much.
Yeah.
We are from China.
Yeah.
I'm Wen. I have been go to the South Pole, North Pole, and Aries and the Himalaya, many mountains. My English is not very good. Maybe.
I'm a student in Sorbonne University, and I want to just nearby the Sorbonne University, and I will present Wen Xu to introduce the effort made by an NGO organization in China named Polo Hub. So since he was 16 years old, and he started to explore the glacier, and one time he just falling down in a very big ice lake in the Tibetan Plateau and mostly died there, and just from that time he noticed the melting of the glacier and tried to make a lot of efforts to make people know more about the melting. And so he makes some a project like to save the ice coins and to dry some ice coin in Tibetan Plateau to save the human the memory of in the ice coin, and also go through the Greenland, and also go through the whole Atlantic alone, to use this activity to make more and more people noticing the change in climate and glacier. And so he also want to talk something here to introduce their efforts, and also would like to know more about your group, and maybe would like to join, and how to join, and to organize more projects together, and do more campaign together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I will reply in English and close the roundtable today. I think we need China on board. So we need Chinese explorers to speak to Chinese people. You need to go to meet Xi Jinping. It's a guy in Beijing, Xi Jinping, to convince him. He has to climb to Xi Jinping, convince him to engage in COP28, in the Polar Summit, in all the things that is planning the planet. Thank you very much.